Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Todd Clint's SharePoint Netcast number 145, barely recorded Monday, February 11th, 2013. Tonight's Netcast, I'm Todd Clint, your host, again, barely. Tonight's Netcast was brought to you by the fine folks at Rackspace.com. They provided the download bandwidth if you downloaded this. They provided the machines that were conspiring against me to keep me from recording it tonight. We had a lot of things working against me, but here we are. So that's a miracle unto itself. Only about a half an hour late on the recording. So sorry to everybody in the chat room. You guys have been very patient. They're already suggesting the title for this Netcast be Patience. We'll see. You know, there's a lot of train wreck left to go. So we'll see if that ends up being the message of the day or not. Funny enough, we'll start off the Netcast with the production notes. And boy, next week's production notes are going to be a doozy, huh? Last week I was on the road. Obviously, I was down in San Antonio doing some training. So while I got the Netcast recorded, I wasn't able to get it all rendered up and produced and everything, because I normally do that on a machine over there. A machine that's probably going to get kicked seconds after this Netcast gets done. So I was able to get the files over there, but I wasn't able to get it editing and all that before I got home on Friday night, well, Saturday. So that's why this Netcast 144 was a little late getting out, but it's out. I published the RSS feed this morning, and then got the blog out tonight. So that's all pretty good. But that was all kind of late again because I was traveling and just didn't have a good place on the road to do all this. Plus, I was busy. There was this room full of people. They wanted me to teach a class, and they wanted to learn, so I couldn't do much. But yeah, next week's production notes is going to be a doozy. Can't wait to figure out what caused all this mayhem. Oh, this is awesome. So normally I record and stream and everything off of one box, but tonight that just wasn't possible. I'm lucky I didn't get electrocuted trying to get all this set up. So now I'm recording in one box and streaming on the other box. And I normally paste the notes for what I'm talking about in the chat window. But of course all those notes are on the other box, so I can't do that. So let me see if I can open up my notes on this other box. Goodness. Oh, here it is. Hold on, folks. Hold on to your hats. Okay, so we talked a couple of weeks ago about the difference between SkyDrive and SkyDrive Pro, and we had some pretty lively discussion on it here on the Netcast, in the chat room and all that, and I promised you guys that I would blog that eventually. And I blogged that a couple of days ago, actually Saturday night, I think. And the name of the blog post I can't bring up because all my windows are not cooperating. But it was something like, what is SharePoint, or what is SkyDrive Pro in SharePoint 2013, and how does it relate to SkyDrive? So that was a pretty good blog post. I think I kind of answered the question, and then I just walked through how it all looks to the end user, where the icons show up in your favorites, and how you can sync things, and what some of the functionality was. And it turns out it was a pretty popular post. Turns out nobody knows what the hell SkyDrive is, or SkyDrive Pro is, and so that blog post really hit some nerves. Now, one thing that I don't normally do that I'm absolutely going to do with this blog post is I don't normally change my blog posts after I post them. I normally post them, let them stand on their own, and then take care of any errata or anything in the comments. But what I found is, while the blog post in and of itself is awesome, if there were blog post awards like the Grammys, this would, a Bloggy or Boogie or something, this blog post would get one. But the folks in the comments left a bunch of really great questions that would be awesome if I had them in the blog post. So for the next couple of days, if you've got any questions about SkyDrive Pro or SkyDrive, put them in the comments of that blog post, and then Wednesday or Thursday or something, I'll go through, take those questions and my answers, and then add them to the post, because I don't think very many people read through the comments. And somebody mentioned today that it's not real obvious that there are pages of comments. SharePoint only shows 10 comments per page, so you have to page through them, and it's just not real obvious. So if you've got questions, put them out there. I'll answer them, and then sometime later this week I'll update that blog post and put all the questions. There's some really good questions, and they're just things I didn't think about when I wrote the blog post. So that was good. Now, one of the questions that I got a bunch of mice in front of me, this is awesome. One of the questions that I've gotten a couple of times now is, how can somebody use SkyDrive Pro if they don't have Office 2013 installed? And the first time I got this question, it was from somebody who had a machine that wouldn't run Office 2013, so they're hoping to get the SkyDrive Pro client separate from all that. But then a couple other people in the comments and on Twitter and all that were asking about that. Well, turns out SkyDrive Pro doesn't have its own, installer, so you can't just install SkyDrive Pro. But there is an Office 2013 evaluation, and that includes SkyDrive Pro. So without having a license to Office 2013, you can install that. Now, what I don't know, I haven't tried, is if you install that evaluation and uncheck everything but SkyDrive Pro, if that ends up being licensed and if it'll quit working in 6 months or something, that I don't know. If somebody wants to try that and let me know, that would be awesome. But that gives you the ability to get the SkyDrive Pro functionality without Office 2013. So that was one great question that will be in that new blog post. Another great question that was in there is, will this work with SharePoint 2010? And it will. How cool is that? So if you have Office 2013, you can use SkyDrive Pro to sync your SharePoint 2013 documents locally, but also SharePoint 2010 documents. So that's pretty cool. I did that, tested some stuff on my blog. That works like a champ. So I was pretty surprised, pleasantly, about that. Also, if you start syncing up to multiple farms, you can see that the favorites end up looking exactly the same, but they're just labels. So if you've got a bunch of SharePoint, you can click one and hit F2 and rename it to whatever you want, and it'll stay synced to whatever. So that was kind of nice that you can rename them. That was, again, something that I hadn't thought about looking at before. So in the chat room, they're wondering where everything's at. So this is probably a little more information than you guys care about, but I have two monitors in front of me right now. I'm kind of looking at my hands to make sure you guys can see it. This monitor on my left has the streaming software running in it and the chat room. So when I'm looking at the chat room, I'm looking over here. But the camera, and the camera's right there, the recording one is over here on this side. So I'm looking at the recording, look at my notes in that camera. So that's why my eyes are all over the place. But so the SkyDrive Pro thing's pretty neat. Another question that somebody asked was what files it will sync. And you can copy, if you've just got Explorer windows open, you can drag any file you want in there. But if it's a file the SharePoint won't take, then it just won't sync up and you'll get a little error message. That will also happen if you don't have permission. When I was first making that blog post up and taking all the screenshots, I used an account that only had read-only access, so it synced down real well. When I tried to copy a file over, it didn't sync back up very well, so I had to go in and change my permissions. But it's kind of cool. I mean, the SharePoint or SkyDrive Pro, used to be SharePoint Workspace and used to be Groove before that. And so both of those products kind of had bad names. SkyDrive Pro is actually kind of cool. I'm kind of looking forward to it. And I only blogged all this because people were asking questions, not that I really gave much of a hoot about it. But now that I've been playing with it the last few days, it's kind of neat. I kind of like it. So I'm going to try to take some more advantage of that, start using that for some of the SharePoint stuff that I use. But again, you're probably going to have to hear about this the third week in a row next week if my netcasting equipment hasn't strangled me in my sleep. But again, it'll have some of those questions. So if you have any questions, go out there and leave them out there, and I'll try to answer them. And I keep grabbing the wrong mouse, and I'm just a big mess up here. The next thing that I wanted to talk about, Victor Wyland or how I've never asked him how he pronounces his last name, has been cranking out the awesome blog posts lately. Thanks, Victor. And this one, the one that I'm talking about tonight, is how to secure your Office Web Apps server farm. And this is a really great post because there has been some pretty significant changes in how the Office web apps are published in SharePoint 2013, and so it makes some of the things that we took for granted in SharePoint 2010, makes them all different. So in SharePoint 2010, the Office web apps were installed in your SharePoint farm, so it made all the security things very obvious and all that. But now they're a separate farm, and so now we've got questions like, can we hook up multiple SharePoint farms to one Office web app farm? How do we authenticate things? Stuff like that. And so Victor's blog post is pretty good. He explains one of the problems with the Office web apps in 2013 is they don't run as a service account like they did in 2010. They run as local service, which is, you know, a pretty significant account in Windows, and so you can't change that, and so you have to take your security very seriously. Another thing is that you should use SSL, and I don't know if he calls this out in his blog post or not, but when you're setting up the WAPI connection, and what a fun word WAPI is, but that's the interface that the Office web apps in SharePoint use, WAPI. When you set your WAPI connection up, you have the option of saying allow HTTP. Now, this was one of them the first time I set this up. This was not intuitive. I had the Office web apps running HTTPS, but SharePoint was running HTTP. So when I set the endpoint up, I did not flip the allow HTTP connection because the connection from SharePoint to the Office web apps was HTTPS. So I didn't think I needed to add that extra parameter, and it didn't work, wouldn't connect. And so it turns out that the conversation between the Office web app server and SharePoint is a little more two-way than I thought it was, but since SharePoint is running on HTTP, when the Office web apps talked back, or tried to talk back in my case, they couldn't because it was HTTP, not HTTPS, and I hadn't clicked the allow HTTP thing. So if you're using HTTP anywhere in that whole thing, then you got to make sure and flip that allow HTTP switch. Victor in his thing talks about how you should use SSL everywhere, and that's probably not a bad idea. So Doug's asking a question in the chat room. Todd, you are my hero, and I ran into a weird thing that I would love confirmation on if anyone can provide it. Yes, I am your hero, Doug. I can confirm that. I tried setting up a result source in SharePoint 2013 to a different farm, and it wouldn't let me do it unless it was configured for SSL. So, Doug, I haven't done that exact thing myself, but I would believe it. I mean, that's the kind of thing, and Victor talks about it a little bit in his blog post. Microsoft is definitely pushing the product to be SSL by default, and then you know, HTTP if you gotta. That doesn't surprise me. But he talks about Victor's blog post also talks about firewall rules and some other permissions things. So if you're going to use the Office web apps in 2013, and really you have no reason not to, they will require another machine, but to get read-only functionality out of the Office web apps, so get your previews and search and your previews and your document libraries and all that, that's all free. There's no license for that. So you definitely should do that. But before you install that, before you even double-click the binaries and all that, definitely read Victor's blog post. And another thing that I wanted to bring up is the Office web apps go out of their way to make sure that you don't install them on an existing machine. It's got something else on it, like SharePoint, for instance. Now, if you're clever and you try hard enough, there are ways around that. I'm gonna say that you can do it, but you shouldn't. It's like that old Chris Rock thing. Just because you can teach a bear to dance doesn't mean it's a good idea. And here's why. I've heard some stuff about patching the Office web apps, and it looks like when you run your patches, you're going to have to run the configuration wizard again, which is going to reset some settings. And in the previews, when you did that with the Office web apps, it reset IIS essentially. So now imagine if you've got the Office web apps on a server running SharePoint and something goes through and just wipes out all that IIS stuff. You're going to be a little upset. And I'm going to say I told you so. So don't run your Office web apps on any other server. Just leave those on their own. So again, thanks or talk to Victor for writing that blog post. That was great. He's got another one that he wrote today that I'll probably talk about next week after I've read it, soaked it all in, absorbed it, basked in its greatness. Doug in the chat room is saying, all right, Todd, I got it. Run Office web apps on my SharePoint servers, shrink databases, and eat my vegetables. Got it. No, those are all very bad ideas, Doug. Every single one of them. So another thing that I wanted to talk about, and this is a fun one. So I don't know if you guys have heard, I'm writing a little book, and right now I am in the process of writing the upgrade chapter. I'm not done writing the upgrade chapter, much to my publisher's chagrin. Sorry, Mary and Amy. But I am writing the upgrade chapter, so I've been going out and looking at different upgrade stuff and looking at blog posts about it and trying things and all that. And I was talking to Chris Beckett. He's a buddy of mine, a SharePoint MCM, as I'm dropping names like a fiend here tonight. And him and I were talking about some of the upgrade stuff, and he's going through some upgrades of his own right now. My heart goes out to Chris. He's not having a good time, and he's noticed a bunch of stuff. So basically, what the premise of this session of the Netcast is that switching to claims is going to be tough. When you move to SharePoint 2013, chances are most of you running SharePoint 2010 are not running claims right now. Certainly, when we set stuff up for SharePoint 2010, we told people not to use claims unless they absolutely had to. The classic was fine, and so I think a lot of people heeded our advice because claims was not completely baked in SharePoint 2010. But going to SharePoint 2013, when you do your upgrade, you're going to get screamed at if you try to attach a classic database to a claims web app, and you got to go out of your way to build a classic web app if you want to do that. You got to do it in PowerShell. You can't do it in the UI. And so Chris and I were just kind of talking about, well, is this claims thing worth all the trouble? I mean, really? It's yuck. And so we were kind of talking it out loud, and basically what we came up with is yes, you got to go with claims in SharePoint 2013. And the reason for that is because everything in the back end now is built on top of OAuth and claims. And so if you're not using claims, then you're going to miss a bunch of stuff inside of SharePoint. The first of which will be the aforementioned Office web apps, because the authentication that they use in the back end is claims-based. So if you're not logged in with claims, you can't do that. Another one is the workflow manager, the SharePoint 2013 workflows or the Azure workflows. They had a couple of different names during the preview, but those again use OAuth in the background, so you can't use any of those workflows if you're claims only. And none of the SharePoint apps, the SP apps, will work if you're not logged in with claims, because they all have permissions with them, to figure out if you've got permission to do things and all that. So I think claims is a necessary evil. We're going to have to do that. Now, there's a couple people in the chat room. New SP claim type mapping is your friend. Probably so. I think what I'm probably going to recommend for folks is to go ahead and create a classic web app, attach your classic SharePoint 2010 databases, and then in SharePoint 2013 there is a single commandlet that converts your web app from classic to claims, and that's probably what I'm going to have folks do until I've done it a few times and if I found anything that I don't like about that. But that's kind of what I'm looking at doing. So I know all my admin brethren out there are not loving claims. I'm with you. Fight the good fight, but it's just something we're going to have to wipe our tears, put our big boy and big girl pants on, and just figure this claims thing out. Not going to be easy. There are already bugs. I know there are bugs with claims in 2013, but we got to do what we got to do. We got to toughen up. That's the message here. So last week, and so another thing, those of you that have been watching the Netcast for a while, how much liquid I drink during a Netcast has been the stuff of much discussion. Normally have my white cup that I've had for 100 years, got the big crack down the side, leaks on my desk and all that. Last week when I was at Rackspace teaching the class with Shane, they gave all the students in the class these awesome red Rackspace cups. So I snagged one, and I like it. So I retired my other glass. It's been put out to the great cupboard in the sky. And so I got a new cup. Now, Mark's cheating. Mark in the chat room was in the class, and he got to hear some great stories. These cups have originally came with a lid and a straw that was like leak proof, and within an hour of me finding out that the cup was leak proof, I was able to pour water all over myself and get it to leak just the same. So I've taken the lid off so that I know that there's a liability here, a risk. So don't. That's why there's no lid and straw in there. But yeah, some new big changes here. A lot of improvements at the Netcast. You know, we're doing Ustream, and we got the new chat room. I got a red cup. So it's all good. But another thing that we talked about last week was topologies and just kind of how to lay topologies out in SharePoint 2013. And I had another discussion with a customer today about it, and and so I kind of wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about some of the topology changes in SharePoint 2013. As a general guidance, you know, kind of one of those, you know, SharePoint 2013 with number or with for dummies things. SharePoint 2013 is going to require roughly twice as much hardware resources as SharePoint 2010. Now, what I don't mean is you need twice as many machines, but if you had, you know, a 4-server farm in SharePoint 2010 and those servers were working hard and you know, they didn't have a lot of time sitting around to catch their breath, yeah, then you're probably going to need 4 more machines for SharePoint 2013. But if you had 4 machines and they never went past 10% or 20% utilization, you're probably going to be okay. You can probably make it work with 4 machines. But SharePoint 2013 will require more iron behind it. And like with any version of SharePoint, you know, we get a version of SharePoint and we say, I wish SharePoint had this, and I wish SharePoint had that, and I wish SharePoint had that. And the next version of SharePoint comes out and it has all those things. But there's a pound of flesh that we got to pay, and that pound of flesh is RAM and CPU and all that. So that's why we need more hardware. But there's some other things that impact our topology, just the way we're going to plan things out, and those are kind of the things I wanted to talk about. First, in SharePoint 2013, search has been completely rewritten, and it's a monster now. It just gobbles up machine resources, and so I think for any size farm that's going to have any amount of content in it at all, I think I'm going to recommend just having a dedicated search server way early in the process. Probably before I suggest having the redundant app server, I think, because search just chews up whatever machine it's on, just buries it. Now there's some search tuning things that you can do, but that really only impacts crawling and stuff like that. And it's not going to impact all the stuff that search does in the background, all the social things, because search is now what powers the news feed and all that kind of stuff. It also does all your web analytics things. So there's a little bit of tweaking you can do, but not a lot. And for now, with the RTM, I found that search CPU has been a big problem. In the preview, search had a couple of bugs, and one of the node runner processes leaked, so it would chew up all your RAM. Well, now that it's not doing that, now that it's not killing the box that it's on because it's taking all the RAM, now the CPU's having a chance to really ramp up and chew the box up. So I think for now, until I've got a couple more months of production SharePoint 2013 farms under my belt, I think we're going to have a dedicated search server. So in the chat room, somebody mentioned having a dedicated search farm. Mark did. I wouldn't have a search farm. I don't know that I would go that far. I think you can get the same benefits by just having a dedicated box. But like Doug's mentioning, he turned that on. He turned the continuous crawl on, and it maxed out the box for 5 minutes. And if that box was also trying to do user profiles and trying to do manage metadata and trying to do other stuff, I mean, there's no resources left. So I don't think we're quite at the point where most people need a search farm, but I would have a dedicated search box. Dorks35 in the chat room is asking, should you have one server do both crawling and indexing? So I think I'm going to say have crawling and indexing and admin and analytics, 4 of the 5, on one box, and then query on your web front ends. So that's the 5th search role. And so that's another thing that's different in search in SharePoint 2013 is that crawling and indexing have always been, separate things, but they've always been treated as one thing in SharePoint search. The difference is indexing is the actual well, let's go the other way. Crawling is the actual going across the network and pulling things in. So going out to SharePoint or going out to file shares or whatever, your HTTP sites, and crawling across those things and pulling documents. That's crawling. Indexing is taking that document that the crawler found and breaking it open and finding all the words and all that kind of stuff inside of it. In the past, those have been a single autonomous unit. In 2013, we've got a little more control. So I would have all that. I would have everything but query on, starting on one box, and then query the web front ends. I would probably also have the web front end role on that search box and have it crawling itself, just to keep it from killing the other boxes in your farm. Because I'm telling you, search, it's tough, it's rough. So set up. So think about it. So in the chat room, Doug is saying you can split up the indexing across WFEs. So let's be clear on our terminology here. You can split up the query role, which uses the index file, but having the index file, well, and I wasn't planning on getting this far in the weeds in it, but the web front ends use the index file to do queries, but that doesn't mean they're running the index role. The index role is the one that takes the file that the crawler got, breaks it open, does the, pulls the things out, and then writes those results to the index file, which are probably on the query servers. So maybe I need for next week just to do a little search primer and get into the weeds a little bit more on this. But if you've got a small farm, just expect search to take a lot of resources. And the other thing about search is, by default, when you create search, all the search roles are going to go on whatever server central admin is on, no matter what you do. And our friendly little change topology button that we had in SharePoint 2010 is gone. And so you need to move all those roles with PowerShell. And it's not incredibly intuitive, but just know that that's the case. There's no way in central admin to move search components around. You have to do it all in PowerShell. So that sounds like that might be a good blog post too. Yeah, it is, and yeah, it's documented well. So if you, as you're trying to plan those machines out, just know that you're probably going to have to move that, and it's going to be some ugly PowerShell. But again, I mean, I'm thinking for farms as small as probably 4 servers, one of those is probably going to be search, and then maybe 2 web front ends and an app or something, because search is just killer. Just killer in SharePoint 2013. It does some crazy cool stuff, but it just burn a box down. So the other thing that I want to talk about for topologies is the workflow manager. Again, the Azure workflows, the SharePoint 2013 workflow. Like the Office web apps, that's a separate farm. That's a separate thing. It doesn't show up in SharePoint. But that one so far, with the limited testing that I've done, doesn't seem like it takes very many resources. And unlike the Office web apps, it's pretty understanding about being installed on a box that has other stuff on it. So I think for now, I'm okay with installing the Workflow Manager server on like my app server or something. I think that's probably okay. You could move it later if you needed to, and you could build workflow farms and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think right now folks are going to need a dedicated Workflow Manager. But do remember, when you install that, you have to install the Workflow Manager client on all of your SharePoint boxes, all the boxes that don't have the server on it. But again, most of that stuff's pretty flexible, so you can move it if you need to. So as we start having more real-life SharePoint 2013 farms to look at, we'll have more of these things to talk about. But the topology, there's just a few little weird things that I wanted to talk about. So this is a weird one. Speaking of topologies and all that stuff and what we were talking about in our class, a bunch of us rackers were out to eat Thursday night, I think, and Shane and I were pontificating about something, and Mike, the guy that was in the last week's Netcast, which you guys probably haven't seen because I just posted it, but Mike was saying, we need to make a shirt that says, what would Shane and Todd do? And Stephen Wilson, one of the many, many jokers in our crew, took that little whimsical idea, and he made them. So you can go out to Zazzle, and you can buy a WWSTD t-shirt. What would Shane and Todd do? anytime I see shirts with my name on it, I think it's kind of goofy. But anyway, Steven's got those out there. They're sure to be a big hit. I'll probably get one before long. But yeah, so the WWSTD, that was kind of on purpose. That was kind of funny. So it's got the logo, and I will probably do something. I don't know if there's time for SP TechCon here in a couple of weeks, but I'll probably do something. So if you want to show your pride, buy yourself a WWSTD shirt at Zazzle.com. I couldn't believe that he did it. All right, so one last thing that I wanted to talk about is I got an email from, I'm going to forget the guy's name. I just blanked on his name. Anyway, one of the guys at Splunk. And I think I remember his name, but I don't want to say it wrong. So anyway, he was talking about, he sent me an email and said, hey, I understand you're a SharePoint guy, and Splunk is monitoring software, if anybody hasn't used Splunk before. And he wants to make a SharePoint module for it. And so he said, hey, I understand you do some stuff with SharePoint, and if you would like to provide me with some issues, there it is. I was right. The guy's name, Adrian Hall. Okay. Sorry about that, Adrian. I remember what your name was. So basically what Splunk does is it just combs through logs and hits on things. And it combs through ULS logs and Windows logs and all that kind of stuff. And they want to write a SharePoint module. So his question to me was, what problems do SharePoint admins have with their farms, and what kind of things would they like Splunk to find, essentially? And so I said, well, I've got a list of things that I know about, but I'm going to farm this out to you guys. So if you've got any kind of issues that you think that this Splunk product should look for, so I can't believe this came up, but Mark Christman in the chat room said UPS screwing up. Who does that happen to? Come on. You must be the only guy, Mark, that's ever had this problem. So I told Adrian that I would put it out there in the Netcast, so the guys in the chat room are getting first crack at it. But when you download this, send me an email or something to let me know what things you want me to pass along to Adrian. You could probably also email him at photoadrian@gmail.com. I will not put that in the show notes because I don't want the spammers to grab a hold of it, but I'll put it in the chat room for you guys. But then I just thought I'd give him a list of the things that you guys, who are actually out in the field and actually troubleshooting SharePoint, what you guys would like to see in Splunk. And if you're using Splunk, let me know. I would love to report back to him and tell him that we've got some folks using it. So he's looking for the top 10 SharePoint admin challenges, and I want to give him a pretty good list. So if you get a chance, shoot me an email, todd.clint@rackspace.com, or hit me up on Twitter @ToddClint, and just give me some of your SharePoint administrative challenges. So Doug is asking, does it summarize logs? I don't think that it summarizes logs. I think it goes, okay, Trevor's used it, he says it does. I stand corrected. My quick look at it, and I haven't used it much, is that it goes through logs and looks for symptoms of problems and alerts you on them, but I could be wrong. You can go to Splunk, SPLUNK.com, and find out all about it there. But if we can help Adrian out, I would like to show him how great the SharePoint community is, and that we can get him some valuable stuff. So again, todd.clint@rackspace.com or @ToddClint, and let me know some of the stuff that I can pass on to Adrian. All right, so I mentioned earlier that I was working on a book, SharePoint 2013 Administration. Nearly finished, putting some finishing touches on the upgrade chapter right now. So hopefully that. Again, with that book, if you want to get a autographed copy of that book, I mean, you can reserve it at Amazon now, but if you want an autographed copy of the book from me, hold off, because I'll be selling them on my website. I'll probably be selling them at store.toddclint.com. So don't reserve one at Amazon if you're going to get one from me, but by all means, reserve one at Amazon. They gave us a new cover this year. It's very exciting. I don't think it's released publicly yet, but I saw a sneak peek last week. I like it very much. The train was cool. This is even better. So I'm very excited about that. So here in a couple weeks, March 3rd through the 6th, is SP TechCon in San Francisco. So I'm going to be there. Shane and I, we got a session on Monday. I think we're doing the install session on Monday, and then Wednesday we're doing our admin sessions. So I just said that the cover of our last book had a train on it, and it was pretty cool. This cover is even cooler. So Dan in the chat room said, "Does it have 2 trains?" Dan, I can't say anything about what the cover is, but that's a funny guess. That's funny. I'm not trying to be coy. I'm not saying, but that's a pretty funny guess. But going to be at SP TechCon. So Monday we're doing the install. That's Monday, March 4th, and then the 6th we're doing our 2 admin sessions. So now I was guessing 3 trains. You guys are awesome. So that'll be fun. So if you're going to be at the SP TechCon in San Francisco, Rackspace is going to have a booth, of course. But find me. If you listen to this netcast, even if we've talked before, even if you've met me before and all that, come find me. Find me at the sessions. There's a bunch of other stuff going on. There's going to be the lightning talks Monday night. There's going to be some other things. You definitely come up and say, hey, shake my hand, tell me how terrible the netcast is, all that kind of stuff. Definitely do love talking to the viewers. And every time, if anybody's ever met me, I always love to know how you stumbled across the netcast, what you like, what I can do better, all that. So definitely come find me if you're going to be at SP TechCon. And I saw in Adrian's email when he emailed me, he asked if I was going to be at TechEd this year in New Orleans. Yeah, I think it probably will be. They haven't announced everything for all that, but I haven't not been to a TechEd in like 8 years. So yeah, let's assume that I'm going to be at TechEd. So if you're going to be at TechEd, we should hook up. Same deal. We can grab lunch or something, or you can stop by the Rackspace booth or whatever we're doing. But definitely, if you're going to be at TechEd, let me know, and we'll make something happen. Now, one of the things that I'm going to do, and I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this, but it's going to be kind of fun. SP TechCon is Sunday, March 3rd through Wednesday, March 6th, and I was making my flights and all that, and I'm like, Leo Laporte and his gang of merry netcasters are just a little north of San Francisco in Petaluma, and he records Windows Weekly on Thursday. So I'm actually going to stay an extra day in California and go up to Petaluma on Thursday and go to the Brick Twit House and watch Windows Weekly get recorded live. So that'll be cool. I met Leo at the New Media Expo in January. Very friendly guy. Love chatting with him, so I'm going to try to go up there and do that. And I know, so one of the co-hosts of Windows Weekly, Paul Thurrott, is a friend of mine, so I'm going to try to prime him and see if he can find some reason to talk about SharePoint that week so that I can try to get on camera. There's no chance that's going to happen, but it would be super duper cool if it did. So I'm going to try, dorks. I'm going to try. I can't imagine he's going to. I got a face for radio, but I'm going to try to make that happen. So I've been watching Leo's stuff forever. And it's just going to be cool. Again, meeting the guy was awesome, but actually going to the studio and seeing everything is going to be great. So that's going to be cool. So again, just a nerd thing, but March 7th, if you don't watch Windows Weekly, you should watch it because I'm going to be there. Yeah, so Dorks35 in the chat room is talking about it. Yeah, there's, you got the slash dot effect and the dig effect. There's the twit effect too. You get your URL out there and it'll just take your server to its knees. But anyway, so that's it. Me and Tom Merritt, I would love to. Again, Tom Merritt's got a face for TV. I've got a face for radio. So apologize for all the technical difficulties and getting this thing on the air a half an hour late. Hopefully I've got good recording so that I actually can produce this thing and get a netcast out there. So I think after this I'll be rebooting everything around all the way around, see if I can get these USB problems straightened out. Don't forget, we got a YouTube channel now. You can go out to YouTube, search for me. You can watch the video on YouTube if you want. You can always download the MP3s. There's an RSS feed for the Windows video, the iTunes video. Any way you want to consume this little plate of SharePoint goodness, definitely get out there. A lot of these changes that I've made, the Ustream and the YouTube and all that kind of stuff, are suggestions that people have made to me. So if you've got suggestions, give me a holler. I would love to know if you like the YouTube thing. A couple of folks have left comments there. Some people have given me likes. So that's good stuff. That lets me know where people are consuming it and all that. But one of the goals of all this stuff, my blog, the Netcast and all that, is just making it easy for you guys to consume and get information. It's all about that for me. So if there's things I can do to help out with that, give me a shout. All right, everybody. I'm way past my time. It's past my bedtime, and I need my beauty sleep. Holy cow. So thanks, everybody. Again, my apologies to the chat room. Hopefully we'll have this all straightened out by next week. So thanks, everybody, and have a good night.